Hi, I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. In coordination with Emplify, our webinar is titled Lead Like a Human, the HR Leader's Guide to Building Engaged Teams. Since the turn of the millennium, the workforce has changed drastically. New generations have brought a shift in values with them, ranking cultural values far more important than compensation and benefits. In today's session, author and Emplify Chief People Officer and co-founder, Adam Weber, shares practical solutions for people leaders. By not viewing people as cogs, but managing people like they are actually people, the benefit is not only unlocking the success of the individual, but also the company. It begins and ends with leading like a human. For those of you who may not be familiar, Emplify is a data-driven employee engagement improvement solution that helps executives and HR leaders make better people decisions and improve business results. Informed by science and psychometrics, Emplify is the first to fuse a software platform, agile process, and expert human strategists into a data-proven employee engagement system. It's focused on achieving iterative business transformation through simple, actionable, and timely cultural measurement and coaching. Now, additionally, Adam is the author of a new bestseller called Lead Like a Human. It will be out September 1st. And all of you who are here today are entered in a raffle to receive advanced copies. So stay tuned for that. Now, a few just housekeeping items here, a few logistical things. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. So look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link that you can share. About 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime, starting right now, using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Adam Weber from Emplify.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. It's good to be with you all today. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. Okay. Okay, give me just a second here. Hope wherever you are, you've got a nice cup of coffee or something else to enjoy. And I do appreciate all of you just taking the time. I know that it's a big time commitment to learn new things. So hopefully you will get something new out of this. If this is the only talk that you're attending today, I do assure you it will be the very best one of your entire day. All right, so with that said, can Steve, just confirming you can see my screen okay without, you can see the actual presentation okay?
Yes, indeed.
All right, let's rock and roll then, everyone. So first off, we're gonna talk about how the world has fundamentally shifted since the 90s. Back in the 1990s, people didn't know how the sixth sense ended. And if you already know the answer, I hate to, or if you haven't seen it yet, I hate to tell you that he's not alive. And also, this was what the phone looked like. And if you were like me, you likely had different colors of this phone. You know, maybe I was having a red day, maybe I was having a blue day. It just depended on my mood and like what I would bring that day. And I was an absolute wizard with T9 work.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
So sorry, but we can see the presenter notes and not so much the presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, shoot. Here, let me.
Maybe just share your screen and only show that tab.
Yeah. That also just really ruins all the jokes too. You know what I mean? So like that just sort of that was good for you to do. So I'm actually just going to take off the presenter notes and just roll with it because I'm having some Zoom issues figuring out how to do that. So if you all will just forgive me there. Okay, that working?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. So and this was me in 1990. My coworkers, when they saw this picture, were like, wow, if that you could talk to your wife and say, look at like what you did, you would be very proud of yourself. I do love, just for context, by the way, like this is before the iPhone, like it's really hard to get a picture of yourself from the 90s. It usually looks something like an awkward conversation with your mother that says, hey, I need a picture from the early 90s. And she's like, Are you sure about that? Do you remember what that time was like for you? But the reality is that our workforce has also fundamentally shifted in those last 90 or in the last 20 years. Now, what I mean by that is in the 90s, there were no millennials in the workforce. And yet today it now makes up the majority of the workforce. In this fundamental shift, while not about millennials, the values of the workforce and how people think about their job in general has fundamentally shifted. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about. And if you think 20 years ago, what mattered were things like stability, compensation, and benefits. And so what did we do with HR? We built HR systems and processes around that concept. And so HR became relegated to administrative functions inside of businesses. But today, what matters to employees are the values and purpose of the business, the authenticity and integrity of senior leadership, and professional development opportunities. And so while that has flipped, has the HR industry caught up to that change, or are we still oftentimes operating more in that administrative mode? The other thing that's changed is just the tenure of an employee. Like, long gone are the days where someone will show up to work and stay at that job for the rest of their career, which is obviously really significant. So for boomers, 7 years, Gen Xers, 5 years, millennials, it's 1.8 years. And we feel this, that it takes over 30 days to fill a role. And so many of the people on this call, this feels very personal. And so the reality, though, is that one of the reasons people are leaving is that they're disengaged. Only 30% of your workforce today, according to our data, shows that your employees are likely engaged. 7 out of 10 people disengaged, hopping around from job to job to job. And now the impact of that disengagement on your company is significant. A disengaged worker is not as productive as they should be. They're not as innovative as they could be, and we'll talk more about that. But think, when a process is broken, a disengaged person puts the blinders on, clocks in and clocks out, doesn't say anything. And that ultimately hurts the bottom line of the business. Actually, an engaged company versus a disengaged company more than 2x outperforms that company. And so it also starts to tap into all sorts of other aspects of the business. Brand reputation, which now more and more people say, I wouldn't work for a company with a bad brand reputation, or values that don't align to my values. And obviously turnover as well. So all hope is not lost, because if you can create a highly engaged culture, your employees are 87% less likely to leave than their disengaged counterparts. And so the question we're going to ask today is, how do we build those high performance teams? How do we adopt and modernize the people ops or HR function to the needs of the workforce today? And so we're going to talk about what that is. What is employee engagement? How we define employee engagement is an employee's intellectual and emotional connection with an employer, demonstrated by motivation and commitment to positively impact the company's vision and goals. So simply put, it's how an employee thinks about the business in their head, how they feel about the business in their heart, and how that's impacted by the work they do every day with their hands. And what we're after is, how do we captivate that employee to bring their very best self to work every single day? Now, 20 years ago, how that looked in that more administrative function was more like satisfaction, which I'll get to in a second, but kind of a lean back posture, like, am I going to quit? Will I refer my friends? And I'll share about that in a second. But engagement is deeper than that. It is, do I bring my best self to work every day? And these are the 17 drivers, and I obviously won't go through all of them. But what they do is they make up what allows a person to show up with that vigor, with that force, with that focus, to be engaged and to be their very best self. Just to give an example of some of the things that stand out here, prior to COVID, which, by the way, I think we should all maybe take a sip of our coffee and acknowledge that it was 5 months ago today, when I call it the Tom Hanks era, or when Tom Hanks got diagnosed and the NBA shut down. That was 5 months ago today. So I don't know if to say time goes by quickly, or wow, that feels like it was about 20 years ago, like you're saying. But just as an example of how these drivers intertwine with each other, prior to COVID, one of the biggest issues that we saw in a booming economy was managers, line level employees were promoted into management early. And they moved into that role. They lacked, this is kind of the macro, if you're looking at all of our data, the macro data set, they moved into that management role. They didn't get the soft skill training they needed. They started managing every person as if they were themselves, and they wreaked absolute havoc on companies. And specifically the places where they lacked was creating psychologically safe environments and giving helpful and productive feedback to their employees. And so what that then creates is an environment where employees are seeing broken processes, but they don't feel comfortable or safe to say anything about it, which is where you lose revenue, which is why the business will not achieve its full purpose. And I would actually, not to go too much on COVID, but I would actually say that singular issue, psychological safety, has been made more challenging because of COVID. And what I mean by that, especially for places that have gone more remote, is the nuance of communication, where maybe we had an issue, but occasionally we would have that moment of connection, or we'd run into each other in the hallway, or we'd have that impromptu conversation, all of that gone. And so how do we create psychologically safe environments where employees feel safe to open up? So just one example here, but we're all complex people. And simply put, what causes teams to not perform is when there is statistical alignment around these different drivers, where a team of people are all having a common issue. That is where disengagement manifests inside of companies. So I mentioned it, but that difference that took place over 20 years is really that difference between a satisfaction-based mindset. I'm comfortable and I'm going to stay. I work only enough to meet basic expectations, to engagement, which is a lean forward posture. How can I drive the business forward? My heart and mind are in it, and I give 115% every day. The best analogy I can give is that if you pay someone too much money to do too little work, they are often satisfied. They maybe won't quit. But that is not how you build high performance teams. That is not how you build a high performance company. And so we're going to talk about this engagement mindset. But to do that, I think it's just acknowledging that shift that took place in our culture. There is still lots of baggage. There is still lots of bad habits that have been passed down that are still impacting and wreaking havoc on our cultures today. And this really goes back to, and this frustrated Frank is a real guy, by the way. I really met him. I was at a talk, my very first time I did a talk very similar to this talk, actually. And 5 minutes in, he jumped in, he saw that millennial slide, and he was like, you know what? And the best way I could describe it is he goes on this diatribe about an entire generation. And it sounded mostly something like this: my employees are lucky to be a part of my team and have a job at a successful company. And they lack work ethic. They want to be involved in everything. And they care more about life in the work-life balance. And in many ways, this was passed down from the Industrial Revolution. And in many ways, because people haven't seen that there is a fundamentally different way to lead, that when new managers move into management, what do? They do the same thing I did the first time I became a manager. You display the patterns of the people who displayed leadership before you. And I tried this. I tried my hand at being a frustrated Frank, and I felt inauthentic, and I wasn't creating the type of teams and the type of environment that I always wanted to create. And so by happenstance, I had a boss who changed everything for me. And the very first day I showed up, his name was Michael, so I gave him this slide. I'd had 10 years of wandering in my career, and he looks at me on the very first day and he says, "Hey, I'm not gonna monitor when you clock in or clock out. I don't care when like when you show up, any of that. Here's what I care about. If you really set your mind to it, I am curious what you can do for our business." And that guy, it awakened in me that concept of engagement, that empowerment. And you see these Michaels all the time now. They're all over. And what they do is they flip the way they think of leadership. And it sounds something more like this. My employees have made the decision to work for me, and it is my responsibility to ensure their work is challenging and meaningful. And the things that we hear them say is they inspire the best, they're transparent, they're authentic, and they focus more on outcomes, not hours. Which, by the way, nothing has really thrust us more into something I've been saying for years, which is it's outcomes, not hours, than COVID. We realized as soon as people went remote, like, oh my gosh, people still work. Like, even if they show up 15 minutes later than I expected them to, it's that we're focused on the quality of work. And what this does is it puts an emphasis on the manager to be clear with their expectations, clear with their role clarity, clear with their feedback. So it's a big job, rather than simply being frustrated and not satisfied with the work that's being produced. And so this is what we're going to talk about. And this is kind of my life's work, is how do you create a team? How do you lead in a new way? And how do you create that team of highly engaged people? And so whether you're an individual manager, or if you're in HR yourself, like I am, or people ops, as I call it, which, by the way, if you're here and you're in HR, it'd be great. Let's just all call it people ops. Let's create a new movement. There's a new way. The old way's gone. That old way. It's let's be new human-based people ops leaders who lead according to the new values of the workforce that drive real meaningful change inside of businesses. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 6 tips that will just simple tips that will help you understand what it means to lead like a human. And so one thing I wanted to add to this too is I do have a resource guide for every single tip. So obviously I've got like 40 minutes today, and I'm going to kind of breeze through these. There's a couple things. I was going to grab my book. Oh, I do have it. This is great. What a great time for an accidental promo. I wrote this book and it comes out in just a couple weeks. And I have a companion guide that we'll share with all of you where you can actually go a little bit deeper on each of these steps as well. So hopefully it's helpful, and I'd really love to share the book. I've been working on it all year, and just am really thrilled to help create a new wave of leaders who lead in a modern way. So, but there's 6 steps to building highly engaged teams, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on all 6 today. So stay relatively high level. But also, I just want to be clear, just so you know me and know my style, I'm all about practicality, keeping it simple, and giving you at least one actionable takeaway. And so as a disclaimer, I just want to say this, that you have a different world and context than I have. I will do my best to give you examples that relate to your world, but I challenge you to do the work of translation in your own world and apply it in your own way. You're your own person. You have your own situation. You're smart. You've got this. Do the work of translation and make this your own. And you can create something really special and different than what you're going to hear today. So I'll walk you through each of the 6 steps. First, take a sip of water. This is very different. By the way, I've done this talk like 100 times, a version of this talk, and I've never really done it like on a video. I've always been live with people. So I'm taking all of your energy. I hope you're sending it my way. It's good to be with you all. There's a couple hundred people on here. And so just in a world where we all often are alone right now, I hope that we can all kind of feel a little bit of that energy and a little bit of that connection when we're all brought together. So even though I'm hiding in the closet of my house. So, and I'm saying funny jokes that no one's laughing at, which is hard. It's difficult to do. I'll say I didn't realize the ego I had around my jokes and actually hearing other people laugh, but I'll take what I can get. So it's good to be with you. Here are the 6 steps. The first one is centeredness. And we're just going to start right with it, because when you show up to talks like this, oftentimes you're hoping for the silver bullet. You want that one thing that's going to change your world. And if I can just learn here's the basic mindset, is it goes, if I can just learn one more new thing, that might be the thing that fixes, insert whatever difficult scenario that you're in, which I have endless empathy for, as I have been in a variety of difficult scenarios, being an entrepreneur for the last 9 years. But the reality is that the key to being a good leader, that before any of the other practical tips and tricks, there is a humble reality that you have to do the work yourself. That there is a component to leadership, and this is one thing I'll say often, is that The hard truth is that there's no silver bullet to becoming an authentic leader. It is truly the combination of doing the work to become an authentic person and applying solid leadership principles and tactics. And so we're going to talk through some of those tactics and principles, but I always feel remiss to just like move straight to them without challenging you to do a genuine assessment of where you are yourself in your life. And are you putting yourself in a position to be the most authentic leader that you need to be? Again, it matters. It is one of the two most important things that the workforce is saying about the companies they work for. Do I work for an authentic leader? And so I can't tell you exactly how to become authentic. What I can tell you is what I can do is encourage you to think about healthy disciplines in your life that give you the best opportunity to become that person. Authentic leaders show up every single day as authentic leaders, but it is a discipline. It takes work. It takes transparency. And so just a couple things I want to talk about with this. The first is the process or the practice of self-reflection. And we don't need to go too deep into this, but just in my own world to let you know what this looks like. I start every day by making sure that I journal and that I read something that is timelessly true. So for me, that looks like poetry, right? But what the practice is, the leadership practice is how are you developing and growing in your own self-awareness? The reason that matters is that leaders often create wakes and thrash fields and look back at the burnt field afterwards, all the while to go, well, what did I do to create that? But by growing in your self-awareness as a leader, what you can do is you can be more mindful of those moments where, man, something has pushed my buttons right now. I am in a heightened state. This might be a good spot to step back as opposed to lean forward. And that's really where growing in your self-awareness helps. The other, it's easy, especially if you're most people on this call, you're really driven people, right? We're driven to do, like, we're excited about our work, but having a hobby, having things outside of work matter. It matters because it roots you in something it gives you, it de-stresses, it roots you, it helps you become more of yourself. And then the last is just focusing on your health. And I mean the holistic view of your health. But I think it is critical that if you truly want to become the leader that you aspire to become, that you set disciplines in your life, whether it's through meditation, physical exercise, those things as well. And so in my workbook actually talks through, it has a really practical guide on, it talks about gratitude, it talks about your morning routine, all of those components. And so just want to talk through that. That is the foundation. I mean, this is really the reason why I start with this, is that everything else I'm going to share is truly moot if there's not a layer to this that is like, are you yourself committed to becoming the most authentic leader that you can be, and knowing that you've been tasked with a really big responsibility, or if you're in HR, it's both you and how do I create this environment as well. The next is aligning around company purpose. We shared earlier, one of the things that just matters a lot to the workforce today is, do I work for a company that has a meaning, like that has a purpose that matters to me? And all too often, this is like what purposes look like. They look like those old posters from the 90s that have gathered dust, that sit on a wall, that don't mean anything anymore. They're not activated. And so, and I always ask people here, like, if you really went back and polled people at your company, what is our company purpose? Would you get the same answer? Like, why do we exist? And now knowing that this is one of the most critical parts of an engaged workforce, that they work for a company where they believe that the company matters, it might be time to reignite this at your own company. I would challenge, always, especially with a couple hundred people on this call, I know some of you are like, I want this so badly, but senior leadership, I could never create it, right? Create it in your world then. So that's when I mean do translation, that's what I mean. Create it in your own world. Create the purpose for why your team exists and start living it out and showing the impact that it can have. But at the company level, here's the reality. You got a couple hundred people on this. There are people on this call right now, on this Zoom, who do the same thing as you. And so the deeper question is, why does what you do matter, and what difference are you making in the world? and making sure that that is clearly articulated. I mean, that is really purpose in a nutshell, which is like lots of people do what you do, but why? Like, why do you do what you do? And now once you have that identified, how do we activate it? We've already decided it. We've already named statistics and data are telling us it is one of the three most important things. So how do we build strategies around that activate it? So just going to share some really practical things, but like when this is in the wild, and I'm sure you've heard this, John F. Kennedy at the start of the NASA space, when they first launched NASA, he's walking the halls and he sees a janitor and he says, "Sir, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." And that mindset, that is when the person's role is aligned to the purpose. All too often at businesses, we focus on bottom line, we focus on that individual role, and the people who are closest to seeing the purpose actualized get to experience the purpose actualized. And everyone else, maybe people have really thankless jobs, they don't feel connected or reminded of that purpose lived in the wild. And so a couple practical ways that you can start to systematize this and build processes around it that will drive engagement on your team. The first is, and this is the most important, it is create a cadence or a system for sharing the stories of your customers back to the entire company. And again, do the translation yourself. You know this work. And by customers, trade that word out. Whatever the point is, if you know your purpose and why you ultimately exist, it cannot be a fantasy. There has to be reality that is existing today of this purpose actually living in the wild right now. And so if it is happening, everyone in the company needs to know about it. We need to remind them of why their individual job, while it can feel thankless and disconnected and tiring, especially in a season like this, why it all connects, why we're all connected and we're doing something bigger. So create a cadence and share those stories back to the company. And the other one is celebrate when it's happening, like celebrate the milestones that happen along the way. One of the things practically that we do, so one of our purpose, we want to help all people achieve their true potential at work. And our first milestone, we want 1 million people to be impacted by our company and our product, to have a better work experience because of the tool that we do. So we created these Legos and we pass out Legos for our first 100,000 people we surveyed and 200,000 people that used our tool. And so we're mapping along that and we're celebrating. But the best version of this in our own world, with that kind of million number has always been significant, is we have a sales rep on our team who last year sold their $1 millionth, which is a big deal. We're not a huge business, big deal. We were really excited. And so we celebrate those small moments. And when he was giving his toast, what really stuck out to me in an example of like this being in the wild is he said, "You know what, everyone, I'm so appreciative because I wouldn't have gotten here without you." You know, all the stuff you expect him to say. He said, "But what I'm most proud of is I did the math and 40,000 employees were able to experience a better work experience because of the work that I did. And that's what matters. That's why I do what I do." And so that is how, when a purpose is activated, it lives beyond the people ops department. It lives beyond the leadership team. It is in full motion. But to do that, you've got to keep reiterating and reinforcing. And so what ways can you celebrate? What ways can you celebrate right now the small wins where your purpose is being activated in the wild? And so this is kind of the summary. Just connect people to the purpose. Share stories of success, celebrate milestones, and create initiatives, which the workbook talks a little bit more about. But basically, if you have a noble purpose on why you exist in the world, are you creating unique space and opportunities for your people to over-deliver? Like, are you giving them space to also live out the purpose as well? And the next one, and it really goes hand in hand, is activate your core values. And as it relates to activating your core values, again, I could probably use the dusty frame analogy to start this as well. But too often we have core values also that are living on a shelf that aren't activated. And so the first question, and just pause for a quick second, because when you're in something like you took time today, you stepped away today, and there are people inside of your company who exude and exemplify your culture. And so I call them your cultural rock stars, but just take a quick second. We're going to pause for like 5 seconds, take a deep breath, and just think, who are our cultural rock stars? Now, a couple things depending on your scenario, because there's a couple ways this can go. But one is, if you have values that are stale and outdated and not authentically true today, use that team of people that you just thought of and recreate your values and relaunch your values. And we can talk through how to do that. There's kind of a step-by-step guide on how to do that. But that's your foundation right there, because your values ultimately should already be lived. They should be seen in the very best parts of your culture today. They should already be true. The work that needs to be done is kind of the unearthing of it, right? The really uncovering it and then the activating of it. Now, once you have these people identified and you have your values, I think it's really important that you integrate them into your hiring process. You take these cultural rock stars and you integrate them into the hiring process. If you want to create a company of people who think like owners, who show up and bring their best self to work every day, give them authority regardless of their role and empower them to help understand if new people that come in, do they fit the values of the culture? Now, the key to doing this, because I get this question all the time, but the key to integrating values into your hiring process is that it's critical that you have ways to actually assess the values. It can't be squishy. It can't be, because that starts to lead you down the road of, well, do they look like us? Do they act like us? Do they talk like us? No. Our values should have definitions around it. I just peeled back the curtain on one of ours. This is one of our, we have 6 values. And under every value, there is a measurable that lays out if you are accomplishing these values. So into the hiring process, you're going to reverse engineer questions that help you see if this person has exhibited the traits that are needed to be successful. But then also on the feedback side as well. So for an employee, truly activated values are integrated into your performance reviews. So to do that, each value does need to be named and measurable. Are these values actually being lived out? And what that does is it creates a culture that there's two ways to think about, say, a traditional performance review, for example. One is, what did you do, right? And we're all really good about doing the what did you do? Like, is this person performing? But the thing we need to make sure we layer in with that, and this is where the values come in, it's the how did you do it? Did you do it, like the how? Did you do it in a way that was aligned to our values as well? And that is how you create that's how you create a highly engaged team, by integrating the how into the performance of the company. One thing too, just to bring these to life, a couple things, is do you recognize and award people for living out those values? So I'll take this to the micro and the macro. On the micro, creating systems around each individual manager every week, making sure they have the discipline to highlight a specific person exhibiting a specific value in an authentic way. That helps perpetuate the culture. And then on the macro, allowing the peers or the employees to nominate and award people who are exhibiting those values. Again, we want the values to be bigger than the people ops department, and we want it to be bigger than the leadership team. And so to do that, we have to empower the employees to see the values lived. They're already true, see them live, and then share them back to the company. So we integrate those values into our hiring decisions. We incorporate the values into the how component of our feedback, and we use values in our recognition as well. The next one is set goals. This set goals, why goals matter. Just to talk a little bit, it's because people go, oh, set goals, that makes sense, but we don't actually do it. We don't do it very often. We all understand it intuitively that it matters, but we don't do it very often. So why goals matter is that the purpose part that we talked about earlier that matters so much to driving team performance, like, do I work for a company that has a why that I align to, a noble purpose in the world? But there's another component to that, which is, as an individual, do I get personal meaning and fulfillment out of the work that I do. And then where you really build highly engaged teams is when you merge these two concepts together. The company exists for a noble purpose. I get personal meaning, and and the two are connected. I have found no more effective way to do that than through goal setting, by bridging the gap and helping people uncover their own personal whys and help them recognize like why they're doing the work that they're doing. So the workbook, as I mentioned earlier, it has a guide if you're interested, just on the way we practically do this here, and we've helped lots of other organizations do this now, but is an annual at the start of the year, right? People are kind of in a fresh perspective, setting up a rhythm for a goal setting session and making sure, but this basically isn't at the company level, it's between the manager and the employee and then and that individual team. Do we understand the personal goals and the professional goals of the team? And then as a manager, do you have clarity of those goals and what your role is in supporting them? So identify that employee's why, map out the plan. One of the benefits is, and just because I'm tight on time, I won't go too far into it, but is that there's a beautiful accountability that happens when teams share with each other the bigger why, like why are you actually doing what you're doing? Not the, oh, I want to make more money. For some, maybe, but for others, it's, I want to take my kids to Disney World. I wish I had more time for this thing. I want to go to Italy. Whatever it is, you need to know, as a good leader creates systems that help their managers know what the why is that motivates that employee. And then those managers integrate their support of those goals into their one-on-ones. I'm going to keep moving just to make sure we stay on time. So the next one is continual improvement, which you all obviously have displayed by showing up here today. And that is the true reality of building high performance teams. You have to create a team that is continually improving. I have this fundamental belief that no high performance team exists unless everyone on the team recognizes that where we are today, we have to get better than where we are today. Nothing is static. We're either improving or we're moving backwards. And as a leader or of teams, it truly does start with you and your ability to display this inside of your company. And again, if you're building systems and processes, it's how do I create a culture of leaders where this is a part of who we are? So so as a leader, I want to display back to the company how I also am improving. Because when you do that, a willingness to get better, to continually improve, it allows and it opens the door for other people to receive the same kind of feedback. So I share this example here just because this is when this guy here, his name's Derek. He's an amazing, super talented, works for a company called Sales Loft. Simply put, for a while, he did the same job as me and he's better at it than I am. And so I met him at a conference and I said, can I just shadow you for a day? And I went and learned, and he let me sit in every meeting, and I deconstructed everything I learned and things I needed to get better. And I shared it right back with the team. And what that does is it shows them the high bar I hold myself to. And in doing that, it gives me permission to hold them to a higher bar as well. The other one, and by the way, lots of other people have done this. I share myself just so you know I'm not just like saying random things. I actually do these things. The other is making sure that I do the jobs of our employees as well. This is an example of me trying to do a sales call where I this is me getting rejected. So I took a nice screenshot of it. But I would run calls and then share and ask for feedback from the team as well. And I encourage everyone, whether it's once a quarter or once a month, to do the role of the people on your team. Or if you're in people ops, creating systems where your managers are doing their employees' job. It opens the floodgates of communication. It creates psychologically safe environments. And it also builds a remarkable amount of empathy when the leaders either see a broken process and the doors are open for conversation, or they realize that the job just has unnecessary blockers that are difficult. So it starts with you. Put yourself in their shoes, create consistent rhythms for feedback. And then the one we didn't talk about, but is just like let your employees start the one-on-ones, which is absolutely critical. If you're trying to build scale in how you do this. If you're like someone who's trying to actually put this into practice and build scale, it's your management programs need to be centered around making sure that the manager actually does the job of the employee with some rhythm and displays their own growth areas, whether it's things as deep as like, I am working on improving how I give feedback or my listening. I'm inviting you to let me know when I'm not living that out to the fullest. again, now permission is granted for me to raise the bar of my team when I do that. And then last is just a steady and consistent rhythm for one-on-ones and reviews. And then making sure that the leader doesn't hijack those meetings, but that they begin with allowing the employee, like understanding and hearing from the employee before they take over. Little thing called role power, which I think we all know about, right? We've all experienced what it's like to have someone with role power hijack a meeting, and then you go, I really needed to talk about this one thing, but now I don't get to talk about it anymore. I'll just, okay, whatever you say goes. You know, you're the most important person. And then now I'm blinders on, clocking in, clocking out. I'm not engaged. The last one is use data, which is an area obviously near and dear to my heart. There's a reason why I started an employee engagement data company. It's because too often I saw that companies were making decisions using gut feel. A story that I saw forever was this, is that I would see like you just not a clear picture of the team and like what issues needed to be resolved. A common story is a CEO who one of their closest people to them, is amazing at managing up, and they have an answer for every problem, but managing down, total chaos. They're wreaking havoc on the org, and for 10 years even. I mean, I've seen stories where a CEO is totally blind. Without data, we also listen to our most disengaged people, the bottom 20%, and we listen to the top 20%. But as we talked about earlier, truly creating engaged cultures is finding statistical confidence where batches of drivers are moving together on teams, pinpointing that issue and unblocking that issue. That is how you create high performance teams. And you need data to hear from everyone else, like what really is going on. We're not just going to waste time and do anecdotal feedback. And we do believe that data, if used well, can have the power to revolutionize how leaders engage their team. But too often it's just done terribly. Like we say we want to listen to our people, but there's this massive gap between the survey we run and creating predictable business outcomes. And if you do it poorly, you actually make things worse. You erode trust, you impact morale, retention, and team performance ultimately. So basically you, with good intentions, actually made things worse. Our general philosophy, and this works for all, no matter who you work with, but the general philosophy for a system of creating statistical feedback, making sure that we elevate the voice of the employee, and then leaders make great decisions with statistical confidence based on that. It goes like this. You gather the employee feedback, you learn with statistical confidence what is going on at the team level with each of these teams. You align executives with the truth, not with politics, not with internal bickering. What is the truth of the organization? And once we have the executive team aligned, we equip the managers with the education, resources, and data they need to drive change in a culture. And when you run this process with consistency, you can't do it once a year. It doesn't work, because we live in a fluid culture that is constantly moving. And when you put this in place, you can create high performance teams that will exceed the expectations that you hoped for. So won't go too far into the weeds here, but just to let you know like what good data does, it gives you a core metric on the state of your workforce. Are they engaged? It also breaks down those 17 drivers at the team level by gender, by ethnicity. How are we doing with diversity and inclusion? You should be able to look at all of the drivers and the attributes of your company and have a high level ability to both understand it, but then understand what to do about it. And that's what great data will do for you. So gather feedback, discover the insights, align the executive team, and empower your managers. So let me close with this, because I'm gonna hand it back over to Steve for the Q&A. But I challenge all of you to be your very best self. Be on that journey to be that motivated Michael, to see the best in your team. And it is a great gift to be a leader, and to help all people unlock their true potential. So love to answer your questions. I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, I'm Steve Kep. Just reminding you that you're watching a From Day One webinar titled Lead Like a Human with Adam Weber of Emplify, and the author of a new book by the same title. At this point, Adam will respond to questions from you, the audience, and I had a few of my own that I've sent his way. So back to you, Adam.
Okay, and I'm going to close my presentation down just so I can actually open up the Q&A, everyone, as well. Okay, so let me see here. So Nicole, if you want to help me out too, let me go with the first question. I see someone mentioned earlier that employees are working more and taking less time off than with pre-COVID. I do agree with that. One of the things that happened for us even in our environment was right away we built a free assessment, a well-being assessment for COVID. We shut all development down. We're like, we need to support companies, but we what happened was that we all were working overtime and nobody was taking a break. And also there was nowhere to go. So this immense amount of guilt people were feeling, and they weren't feeling permission to take a break. So we took a month and we made Fridays off mandatory, basically because we realized our self-managed PTO policy that worked really well pre-COVID, it's failing us. It was failing us. And that people needed actually like truly nudged to take time off right now during this season. And so I think for everyone, it's be flexible. The new thing we're doing right now is we're sharing our expectations on minimum times off that we expect, because we are kind of on the continuum, like a really flexible environment. And we're sharing, hey, if you work here, part of working here means we believe rest. It's one of those 17 drivers. Here's the amount of time that we expect our team to take off. And Nicole, who's on the call, that's one of the conversations she and I have all the time. We work hard. We care about what we do, but it is important to recognize you have to create systems and structures around letting people take breaks. Okay, so question 2. How do you fix your managers if company leaders do not hold them accountable and are degrading? Such an easy question. Do you understand what it's like to be the only one on the video and then just you're like, hey, I'm going to ask the hardest possible question? There's a couple hard truths. You can only do what you can do. I would love to say there's some magic answer on how you can but when leaders at the very top of the org create psychologically unsafe environments, it's just a practical, you're in an uphill battle the entire time. So I have seen leaders change. I will say that is one of the reasons I'm such a big believer in data. I've seen some of the hardest hearts when faced with the truth, and even the truth of themselves and how they move. Basically, you have to create some level of self-awareness, either at the top to give them awareness in how they're impacting the org and explaining how that's hurting the bottom line of the business, or you need permission to build a management development course and programming. Which ideally you're doing both, but you're building management development training where you're impacting the specific managers without having to go through the top. Not ideal, just to be clear. Can you provide some specific examples of data? So with what we do, we measure kind of the state of engagement. We do it between 2 and 4 times a year. And it looks at kind of all, whether it's by location, by shift, by gender, by ethnicity, by tenure. And then what we do is we pinpoint different teams and what the core issue is on that team so that you're not guessing. So an example would be, we worked, for example, with if you're in manufacturing, we worked with a manufacturing company where we ran the assessment. And what we found was that the employees, their lowest driver was utilization. So just as a quick example, utilization was really low. The employees are saying, we have more to give than, we're not as productive, as efficient as we should be. And feedback was low. Nobody's asking us or helping us know what to do to get better. What we found out through that data by going a little deeper was the workstations hadn't been audited in 10 years. The walls were dark and drab, and yet they could see up into the window of the office workers at these beautiful offices. And they had they needed a table lift so 2 people wouldn't have to do one person's job. So we just used data. This is at a small business, 150 people. They went from making 150 boat parts a week to 250 boat parts a week just by using data to pinpoint that issue. That team was turning over almost entirely, one shift, almost entirely every single year. So they came to us because the leaders were exhausted going, I just can't keep doing this. How can I replace an entire team every year? And so we not only fixed retention, we also drove productivity in that environment as well. So just one example, but I mean, there's a million of them. It's right now, one of the things we're spending a lot of time on is it's whether it was intentional or not, do we have systems in place that are marginalizing different groups of people, underrepresented groups inside of our company? So we're looking really closely at the fairness driver and ethnicities or gender, and helping use data to guide responses so that companies can raise the bar and raise the standard for what's expected of them. Do you think there are two different sets of values, those you publish externally and those you live internally, which may be more competency-based than values, or would you say those need to be one and the same? I feel like a lot of the company values that get published externally are fluff and don't necessarily translate to action internally. I agree. I would say though that they should be the same. Just make the internal ones good enough that you can share them externally. And it really should be a really compelling part of who you are. We live in a transparent, authentic culture now. Like we live in glass houses. Like your employees right now, while on the job, can look for another job and can write a negative review about your job. And so this idea that we're going to hold things versus no, we're going to be open, but we're going to build great values that we're proud of, that we actually live out, that feel true through the hiring experience, all the way through onboarding, and then for the lifetime of the employee. Okay, questions are just coming in. This is great. What do you consider the optimal size of an organization to start this process, and industries that would be a best fit? Well, so for us, I mean, there are a lot of different companies out there that do this. We specialize usually in companies like under 2,000, and I would say our kind of sweet spot is between, you can start as small as 35 employees, 50 employees. Like actually, you can use scientific data for companies like that, all the way up to 1,000. Where you can really, for us, we're very hands-on. So we're this combination of tech and consulting. And we have found that is where we can, within a year, really transform the culture and help leaders create the types of environments they dreamed of creating. There are other companies that specialize like in big companies, not our sweet spot. We have a handful of companies in that range. And the price ranges we're kind of, if you work with us, I think this person put the dollar amount, so nice sharing publicly. It starts at between $10,000 and $50,000 a year is probably a good range for you based on your company size. As far as industries, what's interesting is we work from fighter pilots to brain surgeons to manufacturing, construction, professional services, technology. Like, because we're measuring something deeper than your job, we're measuring how you feel when you do your job. And if you feel equipped to do your best work, it is relatively industry agnostic. We do a lot. It's pretty much split. I'd say it's pretty much 50-50 between blue collar, kind of more like work with your hands type of work, whether it's manufacturing, construction, and then that professional services, tech, services world as well. How do you shape roles to the strength of employees while still keeping the company's needs at the forefront? That is a great question. I think I don't know if I have a perfect answer like this quickly. I'd like some time to think about that one. I do think one of those drivers is role clarity, and like how often, especially in COVID, oh my goodness, right now, where people go, I have no idea what I'm actually supposed to do every day. Like, I feel a lot of expectations and pressure. The performance pressure right now across our entire data set is through the roof. People are feeling the stress and pressure to perform. They're feeling like goals are out of reach, and they don't exactly know what their job is. And so one thing I would just say that will really help is if we can create better role clarity inside of orgs and align on what is specifically your priority work to do, what the expected outcome of that work is, and timelines to achieve that. It's hard to do those things, but if you can create systems that do that, and then if people aren't the right fit for that role, that's where we talk about transitions inside the business or elsewhere. Let's see. No, I don't. Any other questions? Let's see if one's popping up here. Where can we get your book? Oh, thank you for the softball. So it just came out last week on Amazon for pre-order, and it made the bestseller list on the first day, which I'm super pumped about. So, and it goes live. So you can just go to Amazon, type in Lead Like a Human. We are raffling off 3 of them. I have them all sitting in my basement right now, a whole bunch of them. And we'll get those to you. And it looks like Nicole just shared a link as well. But it goes deeper with some of the things we talked about today, shares a little bit about some of my story as well. What you just said is a huge problem, which is on the performance pressure. Yes, it is. That's the benefit of looking at like hundreds of thousands of data points. It is a big literally the number one problem. It used to be the psych safety for managers, and which is still true. It's still a really big problem, but the performance pressure issue right now and burnout are the big issues right now, like across all companies that we're seeing. So what can we do to take a step back and take the stress and pressure off? I think it is rethinking expectations around rest and how you like being very intentional with how you encourage rest inside of your org. I think it is reworking, making sure that you're very intentional as it relates to outcomes and expectations, and be very, and there needs to be some, and like a lot of companies we're working with right now, we're helping, like thinking about reworking goals to make them actually practical in our world today. Like, did we reassess and readjust the role and outcomes because of the global pandemic, or however your business was impacted, and just being willing to take another draft at that. Gosh, I could go on. That actually is a talk in and of itself. Naming it matters a lot. Since the number one, issue for employees is that authentic leadership. The reality is, like, everybody on this, like, we all feel this. You're not, like, if you're detached from it, like, wow, good for you. But like, we all feel this thing. And I think, and we're all going through something that's very real. And I think that when a leader names that themselves, they give permission. There's a word I use a lot, is this permission. Part of this talk is to help you give permission to be the type of leader you want to be. For an executive, giving permission that how those employees feel right now is okay is another way just to take a little bit of the air out of the balloon as well. Okay, well, I'm never one to go over on time. So I super respect all of you for coming. I hope you got that one thing. Make sure as soon as this is over, you just pause for a quick second, give yourself a couple minutes and just maybe freeform write. Like, I call it hot pinning. Just go, what did I take from this? Do the hard work of translation for yourself. You're smart, capable people, and do something really special with what you learned today. Thank you so much. I'm really honored that you'd take the time to spend it with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That was a very humane presentation. Thank you again to Emplify, and thank you to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events at From Day One, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. This Thursday, August 13th, we'll be talking about managing talent for growth and advancement. And on Tuesday, August 27th, about using tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair. Thanks everyone again. Stay well, and see you soon on From Day One.